I'm Oli Barrett, and over the next few weeks, I'm going to be travelling to meet the chief execs of some of the UK's most successful listed companies. I'm going to find out what drives them, about the challenges they've faced and what they've learned, and most of all, about the impact that they want to have on the world around them. Welcome to the Ambition Nation Listed 50. Today, I'm in conversation with Dorian Gonsalves, Chief Executive of Belvoir Group. Dorian, great to meet you.
Hi.
So tell us a little bit about the group, because it's so much more than it seems. One group, but actually several different brands.
At the heart of the business, we're a franchise business. I want to say a franchise business. We provide a business format. Franchisees follow the format and they trade as either Belvoir, Northwood, Newton Fallowell, Lavelle, a whole host of different brands.
And the realm we're in already is property.
It's all in property, pretty much. So the three key markets that we operate in. Firstly, our DNA, if you like, so we listed as a residential property letting specialist.
Yeah.
That was back in 2012 with a single brand of Belvoir.
Yeah.
We then expanded out in 2015 into a estate agency, partially by means of acquisition and partially by means of sort of rolling out estate agency to our lettings franchisees. And now we operate in estate agency, private rented sector, and also mortgages, which is going particularly well for us.
Yeah. So just to zoom out onto the big picture, Belvoir Group, 6 different brands, some of it letting, some of it buying and selling houses, some of it financial sort of advisory. 400 plus offices, that's about the ballpark across the UK?
Yeah, 467 property-related offices,
Yeah.
so either estate agency or lettings,
Yeah.
and we've got 101 financial services offices, which do include, interestingly, we've got a few shops where people can walk in and just get mortgage advice. So
Yeah,
it's branded as Mortgage Advice Bureau.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with the other AIM-listed Mortgage Advice Bureau,
Yeah.
which we contract with them. We use their brand, their systems, and we're one of their largest clients.
What is it about franchise businesses that sort of, you know, that you find particularly engaging?
I think we are very passionate about franchising as a business model. So it's just one way of running a business, by means of franchising. And I personally think if it's done well, it's a real win-win situation for both the franchisee and for the franchisor. And how it typically works is that a franchisee buys into a way of working, a business model, a business format. They pay the franchisor a small percentage of their turnover.
Yeah.
They get to keep the lion's share. And we, as the franchisor, provide systems, website, training, the sort of business format, the business system, and the franchisees go out there and run their own business. It's brilliant. It works for both parties.
Yeah, it's a fascinating formula. So over the years, sort of following your growth journey, you stepped up into the CEO seat as the company listed 2012. Part of what you've done very well is acquire other businesses. So rather than on the sort of retrospective, looking forward, how do you see that playing out? Are there particular, areas that you might need to acquire in going forward?
It's a good question because there are, I think what's happened over the last 2 years is that as we've expanded our product set into sort of mortgages and we've got better and better at estate agency, is that now we can see the possibility for acquisitions has expanded beyond simply buying a lettings portfolio, which we used to do, a great deal of. And just to give you an idea of the scale of that, so looking backwards slightly, we've done 8 corporate acquisitions in the last 5 years. We've also helped our franchisees to acquire 105 businesses over the same period, but they're generally sort of property lettings type businesses. Going forward, we're very keen to expand our franchise offering, so we may acquire other franchise businesses that may not specifically be in estate agency or lettings or mortgages, but they may offer complementary services that we can sort of tie in with our network, our distribution channels.
What question are you asking yourself, top of your mind, when you're eyeing up a potential acquisition? I just want to get a sense of what goes through a chief exec's mind.
I think it's probably 3 or 4 different questions, but future growth is probably number one.
Yep.
So can we take this business and make it bigger and better? And that's definitely one. And because we already operate a number of other brands, does it fit within our product set, our brand sort of set? They're the 2 main questions, I would imagine. The third one, this is in no particular order, but sort of third question is, are the people, the right people within that business? And what we've done over the last sort of 5 years is as we've acquired, we've retained the best people from within the acquisitions. For example, the first ever multi-brand acquisition that we took on was in 2015, called Newton Fallowell. Mark Newton, who was the founder of that business, is still on board. He's an exec director, he sits on our board, and he's added so much value to the business over the last 5 years. It's incredible.
There's quite a myth sometimes that the acquisition means that the founder must exit, but interesting you can treat that differently.
That's not the case, and it's exactly the same with financial services. So we acquired our first financial services business in 2017. It was called Brook Trading as Mortgage Advice Bureau. The lady who grew that business, Michelle Brook, is still running it. She's still on board, almost 5 years later, and I think Michelle will have a much bigger future with us. She's still growing that business very aggressively.
So Dorian, you listed the company in 2012. That was the time you stepped into the sort of chief exec role. Give me a sense of the positives about being a listed company. What does it enable you to do that you couldn't have done otherwise?
Sure, I think it's fair to say that that it was quite a steep learning curve. I hadn't had any PLC experience before we listed in 2012, but I think we've used our listing very well. We've been back to the market, we've raised money, we've used that money very well, and just one example of how we've used the money, we raised 5 million a few years ago. We've put that out to franchisees in terms of loans to help them to purchase their competitors, to do acquisitions. And actually that 5 million pot, we keep lending it and getting it back, lending it, getting it back. And we've helped franchisees to buy 100 businesses with that pot of money.
So not to put words in your mouth, but your sense is that process of raising that money was sort of more frictionless than it would have been had you not been listed.
Definitely, and that's not the only time we've sort of we've raised money. It's also helped us with the acquisitions of the corporate networks that we've brought, and we've got sort of plans in the future, to continue using our listing for expansion. The sort of final point on that is that when we listed, the value was sort of 16 million. We're now at 98 million, so we've sort of had a steady upward journey in terms of our value.
So let's talk briefly about some of those numbers, because it's another fantastic set of results that you've just released, and growth across all three, across sales, across lettings, across financial services. How have you managed to achieve that, particularly given the backdrop, which we hardly need to mention?
I'd say, first of all, the estate agency sector is where sort of the media coverage generally is. It's all about house prices, transactions, stamp duty holiday. So of course we have had growth from that sector, and it's not just the stamp duty holiday that's driven growth. Behaviour has changed over the last 12 months. People have sort of been worried about missing out and not being able to move house unless they quickly secure a property, as prices have been going up. So lots of reasons why activity has been high in estate agency. If you compare this half year to last half year, across the whole of the UK, transaction numbers have doubled. If you compare the first half against the first half last year, we outperformed the market, and we did 108% more transactions in the first half this year compared to the first half last year.
And why do you think that is then? How have you managed to edge that?
I think I think it's branch coverage for a start. We completed on another acquisition in January last year, which I must admit the timing at the time when we completed on this deal in January last year before COVID started, within a month or two I thought, my word, the timing couldn't have been worse. It was an estate agency business. But as the year unfolded and the market became particularly busy, we're very glad that we had 17 extra estate agency branches. So I think branch network, skill, experience, and of course fabulous franchisees. So I'm a huge advocate of franchising. Having a franchisee within each business just means that they're driven, they own that business, they want it to succeed, and in general they perform better than branch managers. It's their business.
What is your top tip for building that set of relationships, particularly at a distance when you haven't been able to see them in person? I
would say transparency, really. I think commitment and transparency to the franchisees is very important. So franchisees want to know they're dealing with people who deal with them in a very fair manner. So our franchise agreements are the same across the whole of the network, pretty much, subject to one or two changes. But we're very fair, we're very supportive, and the important thing is that franchisees just want to grow their business. We've used our listing to help franchisees grow. We haven't just used the listing to help the PLC grow, if that makes sense. And I think the franchisees actually enjoy being part of a PLC. It gives them more credibility, and it's great.
Property, in a way, is a bit like education, because everyone's got a view on it. It's probably your dinner party nightmare when you solicit. It's like everyone's the expert, and you're like, oh, how fascinating. You know the real story. So give me a sense of any of the trends that you see playing out, because you see it on the ground.
So first off, you've got the stamp duty holiday, which has been covered, very heavily in all the sort of across all media. And what we've seen is about 400,000 more transactions happen this year as a result of the stamp duty holiday and a few other factors, i.e. cheap mortgage lending, fear of missing out, behavioural changes, changes in working patterns. So we've seen a spike in transactions that won't be repeated next year. So that's what we've seen sort of first off. We've also seen property prices grow pretty aggressively over the last 12 months. So over the last 12 months, property prices were up by 13-14%, again depending where you are in the UK. We're also seeing now a shortage of stock across the sector. The private rented sector, i.e. renting buy-to-let, has been overlooked over the last 12 months, and what we're seeing there is rents are going up quite aggressively for the same reason that property prices are going up. There's just a lack of supply. So I think in the future we need really to drive the supply of rental properties and drive the supply of new builds. If we don't do that, rents will continue to rise, property prices will continue to rise.
Totally.
So population is forecast to grow by several million over the next 7 or 8 years. So we're caught in a bit of a perfect storm really, where demand is very, very high and supply is lower than it should be.
The majority of your property business is in lettings as opposed to sort of buying and selling. I just wonder whether you're seeing a sort of a tendency for more people to let, maybe because that property rung on the ladder is just out of reach.
Yeah, again, really good question. That there are sort of 13 million people renting in the UK, and my personal view is that a lot of those people will continue to rent for the next decade or 2 decades or beyond that. And I think there's been a sort of shift in mindset, certainly during my career, whereby, if you wind the clock back 15 years, I think renting was actually seen as the poor relation to property ownership. If you talk to younger people, a lot of younger people just don't see the benefit of having a 30 or 40 year mortgage. They actually want the flexibility of having a 2-bedroom apartment 1 year and having a 3-bedroom house by the sea, sort of the next year. It's freedom, without the commitment. And so the private rented sector needs to continue growing to cater for the needs of changing, a sort of changing belief system almost in attitudes towards housing.
How important is that prime real estate going to be, particularly over the next 5 or 10 years? If you've got a view on that, we've not got a crystal ball, but you must have a sense of where it will go.
I think estate agents will, if they're looking for to have a sizable business, will remain in shops. A lot of our shops are in secondary locations. They're quite often not on the high street. They've got parking so that keys can be dropped off, and they're easily accessible for tenants, landlords, buyers and sellers. And I think the shop-based model or the office-based model has got a really strong future. But I think, like every sector, there's space in our sector for home-run businesses, there's space in our sector for shop-based businesses. We just want more substantial franchises, and they have to be run from, generally, commercial premises.
In terms of future plans, what have you had to change? Is it, projecting as you expected off the back of the last 18 months? What's had to shift?
We're just very excited about growth. I mean, we've had 24 years of unbroken profit growth, which is incredible. This year will be number 25, so that's a quarter of a century. That's such a long time. I've been around for about 17 years of those 25 years. So we're just very excited. We just view the market as being full of opportunities. The mortgage side of the business is particularly exciting in that we've grown from 174 advisors 12 months ago to 242 advisors now. So we represent 15% of Mortgage Advice Bureau's advisor base. So we just think mortgages, lots of growth, private rented sector, rents going up, definite growth in the future. Estate agency always has the peaks and the troughs of the property market, but that's still a relatively small part of our business, so lots of opportunities.
So how do you then, Dorian, tread this line? Because I can get, it's not exactly steady as she goes because the growth is fantastic, but at the same time there must be the temptation to disrupt, to really push boundaries and so on, but you've got to tread that line somehow as the chief exec. So how do you do that?
When I think back to 3 or 4 years ago, there was a lot of fizz around online agents, and I even had some investors say to me, well, Dorian, surely that's the end of you. An online business means they can replace you and do everything cheaper. And I said, well, of course they can't. And actually what's happened is, so a lot of these online businesses started, they've spent a lot of money on marketing, but actually 90% of people selling their property, so 90 out of 100 sellers are still choosing to trade with dare I say it, a traditional agent.
Yeah.
I think the term online agent has sort of been misused in many ways because we've been online for the last 15 years, you know, what's online and what's offline. But actually I think it just goes to show that there's huge strength in having local teams of very highly skilled and motivated estate agents.
Looking forward over the next year, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for the group?
Yep.
And then of course I want to hear about some of the challenges that may be on the horizon as well, but opportunities.
I think acquisition opportunities, definitely one of them. So our sector, unlike other sectors, has seen sort of positive distortion. And what I mean by that is more transactions because of the stamp duty holiday and the other factors, which has resulted in fewer acquisitions. Because if you were an estate agency business operating and your profits are going up and the market's very busy, you're less likely to sell. Similar to a staff member, if they're doing very well, they're less likely to move around. But I think as the market starts to normalise, you know, from January onwards, I think lots more acquisition opportunities will be available. So that's one definite area. Financial services, again, very exciting, and I've mentioned that. But you know, we've grown from a standing start in 2017 to a network with 240 mortgage advisors. I think we can take that much further.
And how about big challenges when you're sort of steeling yourself for this next 12 months?
There'll be a period of adjustment on the estate agency part of the business. So that's one. That's a challenge, but a relatively small challenge, but nevertheless. I think getting hold of the acquisition opportunities is always a challenge. I think we have that challenge every single year, but there's no guarantee we'll be able to secure acquisitions unless we can get in front of them. So we have to work very hard to find the right opportunities. We have an in-house team who does that, and I think they're probably the main challenges. I think the housing market is going to perform very well over the next 3 years. That's my personal view, unless something happens on the lending sort of mortgage side. But mortgages, lending is so cheap, it's so very competitive on the mortgage side. That people can still afford to move out.
Yeah, now I don't want to tempt you across into politics, Dorian, but are there any future levers that you think someone in number 11 could be pulling that not would be good for the business, but might be good for Britain overall? Because you've talked about the amazing knock-on effects of the right choices.
Yeah, I think the housing market actually has suffered from probably too much government interference on the private rented sector side, and too little interference on the home ownership side. I guess, if I was a housing minister, if the housing minister, they'd probably disagree with me, but we've had a lot of housing ministers over the last 20 years. I think we're up to about 20 over the last 20 years. It's a lot. So I think some sort of long-term joined up thinking between parties would be very helpful in terms of solving housing issues. The key challenge with housing issues is that they're very long term. If you want to build 500,000 houses, that's going to take a long time. And our government runs for how long? It's just a few years.
So, what's your sense of how you have, as a group, if you like, an impact on society, of course, on the wider environment? What's an example of a question that you might be asking yourself as you go into that sort of process?
Sure. I think what more can we do as a business to promote environmental, social issues locally and through our franchise network? I think what we have got is a very strong distribution network that we can leverage over the next few years to do more for society and more for our communities. Absolutely. Interestingly, there already is a sort of pathway for properties to become more energy efficient. So that started a few years ago with the implementation of EPC certificates, which you may be aware of, and those standards are gradually increasing, and they're set to increase again in the coming years. So I think landlords have, whether they like it or not, they've had to spend money improving their properties.
I just wonder if you've got any leverage there in terms of whether it's how they insulate property, the choices they make of energy provision, because all of that can have an impact. Or you might say, no, not our business.
I think we've always got to remember that we don't own the property. That's kind of the fundamental point here, and that we can help and we can guide. And one thing that we're very good at is we help landlords to ensure that they operate within the legal framework. And bear in mind that not all landlords use an agent, so landlords who don't use an agent may not be aware of current EPC requirements or current investment requirements for the future. Our franchisees are experts in this field. So we are helping our landlords to be compliant and do whatever they can to meet current standards. So that side we're good at. The side that it's more difficult for us and definitely more challenging If it's not part of the legal framework, then clearly it's optional for a landlord to either do something or not do something. We do have limited powers, as far as that goes.
My takeaway from our chat is that is at the core of your success. It's treading that line between empowerment and structure.
It absolutely is.
And navigating that.
That's the real magic of franchising. That is all about empowerment. We provide the toolkit, but the franchisee has to use the tools. So that is the true definition of empowerment.
And other than liking the look of the returns that they're getting, what is something you hope that an investor, current or future, would say about the group?
I think that shareholders think the share price has got more room to grow. They love the recurring element of the business model. They love the fact that during the pandemic we suspended our dividend but immediately reinstated it, so we didn't miss a dividend even throughout the whole of COVID. And I think that we're a trusted team. I think is probably the number one bit of feedback that we get.
So huge congratulations on being in the Ambition Nation listed 50.
Thank you very much.
It's an epic achievement. Just do me one thing, Dorian, if you would. Go back to an earlier version of yourself, 2012 to be specific. You're about to take the helm of a listed company for the first time. Just one piece of advice to Dorian as you list that company.
I think that, if you're in that position and you have, so I became MD in 2010 as we prepared for the float, and I was CEO during the float. I think just have belief in yourself really, in that although it's a different world and it's a different way of speaking and you could learn lots of things very quickly. The reason that you're there in the first place is because you've got a great business, you've got a great team, the business has got great potential for growth in the future. So just remember all of those things. And actually I think the people around you, your advisors, very, very important. We have a very strong relationship with our advisors. There are a lot of people out there who are willing to give you great advice. But never lose sight of the fact that you believe in yourself and the business really, and everybody else really wants you to succeed, which I think is great.
Well, Dorian Gonsalves, thank you so much for sharing and being so open with me in this conversation today. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.